Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Mercedes have gone into detail on the massive overhaul for next year's W15 car, saying basically every single component in the car will be different to what they've had the last couple of years. Toto Wolff says this has some risks. If it goes wrong, they might not win a race for the next couple of seasons, but it's the only way, feasibly, if they do get it right, to try and challenge Red Bull and Verstappen's dominance of 2023. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, an update on the Mercedes engineer wedding ring that went missing. Don't know if you guys saw this, but he got thrown in the marina on the Sunday or something, and the wedding ring got lost in the marina. They sent divers down to try and find it, and as of a couple of hours ago, someone actually pulled it out, and it's a great work to all involved. I believe this was the man that actually recovered it, so awesome job. But Mercedes also will be hoping, and we'll see this in a second, they can find some aero performance down there because they sorely need it, and I believe this was the first season since 2006 where there was no Mercedes-powered car that won a race. Few big updates going around. Confirmation as well from Verstappen's camp that indeed Rupert Manwaring will be leaving Carlos Sainz and Ferrari. He formerly worked with McLaren with Sainz to go and become Max's new performance trainer, which we rumoured a couple of days ago and has now been confirmed by Verstappen's team. Speaking of Ferrari, rumour has it as well that contract negotiations are ongoing with both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Now, I've said before, and I still wouldn't be surprised if Vasseur would quite like to get Albon into his team. I think it's relatively well known that Leclerc is Vasseur's favourite, but Sainz still does a very commendable job in this team. In terms of average performance between the two drivers, they're pretty damn similar. You know, it's a really strong driver pairing Ferrari have. Leclerc's stronger in qualifying. In certain conditions, Sainz can be better in the race. I do wonder what the future of this pairing is, because Monza, it got pretty heated, I'm not going to lie. The moves that Leclerc tried to make, I think Sainz was over the line at times. And sure, we see some of the friction creep in at Mercedes sometimes with Hamilton and Russell, and if they were to be in a title fight, I think that would get pretty messy. But Ferrari, I don't think, is too far behind. They probably got on slightly better, maybe, I would say, in that type of situation, maybe than Hamilton and Russell do. And they do have a great driver pairing. And I guess for Ferrari, is there any reason to replace Sainz? Obviously, Leclerc, well, unless he goes somewhere else to Red Bull or something, then they're not going to get rid of him. Doesn't make any sense. What he's done in, especially qualifying, right, since he's joined Ferrari has been pretty mesmerising compared to many other Ferrari drivers of the last couple of decades. But if Sainz continues, that will be certainly interesting. I wouldn't say it, as I say, maybe it's not a massive surprise just because maybe there's no realistic upgrade that makes sense to bring in, but I still think Alex Albon should be in consideration there, especially if Sainz to Audi is very likely at some point or another as well, when they officially partner with Sauber and basically take over operations of that team. But Leclerc, I'm sure we'll stay at Ferrari. Sainz, I think, is possibly a matter for debate. We'll see how that progresses. But also, speaking of Leclerc, his race engineer, Xavi, we know that, well, we are checking, on the radio, this guy, basically. A lot of people say that he's not doing very good at his job and Leclerc should get a different race engineer and all this stuff. And, well, we're going to hear, we are checking on the radio for quite some time to come because he's expected to continue in the current role as it presently stands. There was also this on Logan Sargeant. We discussed yesterday and the day before, the rumours around Sargeant getting replaced possibly by Fred Vesti, Mercedes junior driver who drove for Prema in Formula 2 this most recent season. Now, Val says, the TP over at Williams, that they need to analyse all the data to determine whether Sargeant will stay or not, which sounds to me like there's no way this is telling the full story, you know what I mean? I guess what he's trying to say is, oh yeah, we need to look into the data and see, oh well, how much did he improve from this race to that race? Sounds to me like delay tactics, you know what I mean? We say, no, we're going to review the data, and that's definitely why we haven't decided Sargeant's future. It's definitely not that we're waiting for other drivers to come in and say, all right, we can bring you this sponsor, we can bring you this sponsor, and, maybe if a paid driver comes onto the opportunity, maybe that's the way to go. Or they're just straight up considering contract stuff with a Drugovich or a Vesti or someone like this to potentially come in Sargeant's place. I think at this point, Sargeant is more likely to go than he is to stay, because if they were confident he was going to stay, they could have confirmed it at Abu Dhabi. They didn't. They said that it's still a matter of debate. And, well, I don't know what you guys think about this, but I highly doubt that they're actually going back to the factory and going through all the data, and that's how they're going to determine Sargeant's future. I think there's probably more to it than that. Speaking of Vesti, he was not driving at today's post-season test in Formula 2, but these were the standings after the day. So we saw yesterday, Russell bins the car in the Formula 1 post-season testing. Today was the Formula 2 post-season test, and Andrea Kimi Antonelli was in the car for basically the first time, and he was P2. I'm really looking forward to Formula 2 next season, especially with this pairing at Prema. Vesti, of course, is going to go. He's not going to drive Formula 2 anymore. He could because he didn't win the championship. He's either going to be in Formula 1 with Williams, or he's going to do something else for the year. But Behrman and Antonelli. So Behrman is a Ferrari junior driver. I think he's going to be 18 for next season, 18, 19. Still a very young driver. He was second this year in the rookie championship to Victor Martin, but Martin is a couple of years older, the Frenchman. So Behrman was P1 on the day. No, like, this is test classification, doesn't massively matter, but still, at least for Formula 1 testing, nobody really cares about the times. But for Formula 2 testing, it's a little, people care a little bit more about how they do in this stuff, especially when only some of them will ever get to Formula 1. Behrman is the very promising Ferrari junior driver driving for the Prema, and Andrea Kimi Antonelli, he is the Italian driver. He's only 17. I believe he raced against Behrman in like Italian Formula 4 or something a couple of years ago, a championship that Behrman emphatically won, but Antonelli only came in for like half the season and definitely impressed people, and now he's in Formula 2. Mercedes have basically fast-tracked him to Formula 2 here, and already on his first day, basically in this car, he's 1.5 tenths off Behrman in P2, which is kind of impressive. So, if we get a Behrman versus Antonelli fight, I think that those are the two drivers, I think, in the entirety of Formula 2 that have the biggest chance over the next 3 years to get a seat in F1. Antonelli is, well, Mercedes think he's really the next up guy, and Ferrari think that Behrman could be very good as well. And I guess that until a Behrman or someone like that proves that they're capable of getting a seat at Ferrari, then why not just keep Sainz in the team, which I guess is what we saw a couple of minutes ago. Now let's talk about this Mercedes stuff. Firstly, kind of big news actually, that Monster Energy terminated their deal with Mercedes, and they will now partner exclusively with McLaren. You gotta say fair play to Zak Brown, because wasn't that long ago that McLaren car did not have any sponsors on. Now McLaren, like, everything is covered by sponsors, and Zak Brown has killed it on that front. I believe they're still maintaining their partnership with Hamilton, sort of like outside of Mercedes. So if you guys drink the Monster, like the Lewis Hamilton flavored energy drink or whatever the flavor is, I know a lot of people quite like it, that's not going anywhere, I'm pretty sure, but they will be partnering with McLaren as a Formula 1 partner, which is kind of a big move, to be fair. But Hamilton was also commenting in a lot of depth on next year's W15, talking about this past season, his future in the sport, and many other things. He did also make it very clear that he feels the team, Toto Wolff and the entire team, is under massive pressure to deliver a competitive car. At the end of the day, Hamilton isn't here to get second place, and I think you can see this is one of the images. I couldn't quite find an image with Russell as well, but there was a video going around of the team celebrating their second place in the Constructors' Championship, and Hamilton was, in this image he looks quite happy, but in the video you could tell that he didn't really care that much. He was like, oh yeah, nice one guys. Okay, he didn't have a great race on Sunday in Abu Dhabi, but I'm sure that Hamilton, compared to Russell, for example, Russell was buzzing, he's like, oh yeah, P2, and that makes sense. Russell drove a Williams for many years, one more year than he probably wanted. When he eventually came to Mercedes, the car wasn't as good, but still, P2 in the Constructors for George Russell, won a race last year, making podiums. Understandable, he's going to be happy about that. Hamilton, he ain't there for P2, 7 Drivers' Championships, 103 race wins, 104 pole positions now after this season in Hungary. He doesn't care about second place, and I'm sure that part of Hamilton is looking at this picture thinking, do we want to be celebrating second? Sure, they came into the weekends. The only thing they could do is achieve second in the Constructors. They did that, sure, they're going to celebrate. But at the end of the day, they still lost to Red Bull. And this is the point that Toto Wolff makes, is like, we can't be too happy with this result because, yeah, sure, we got P2, but we're not here to get second place. We're here to win championships. And I'm sure that's what Hamilton feels. He answered the question as well. People said, oh, you could get second in the drivers over Perez. And he was like, well, if I do or I don't, who cares, right? But someone's won the championship by a mile. We're not here to, to fight for second place, which is the point that Hamilton is saying, that look, give me a good car. And there's lots of people reading into what Hamilton says in this interview, and we'll dive into a few of the quotes now as to whether Hamilton's considering, doubting himself, being quite pensive, thinking about the future. Is he contemplating retirement and this type of stuff? Like, it wasn't long ago he signed the contract renewal. Then again, when you're making that amount of money, it's probably quite difficult to turn down contract renewals. But nonetheless, I think that if Hamilton was given a car that could compete, he would be the driver in that Mercedes situation that would be able to step up again and compete. But I think when you get to his age, he's naturally going to lose a little bit of an edge on the incredible natural talent that he's got. It must be difficult to drive around in a car that's isn't suiting you and also isn't particularly performing. Like, I feel at the end of the season, certainly Abu Dhabi, Hamilton, I don't know if he was fully locked in, really. I mean, it felt like he just wanted the season over with. And I totally get that, but that's not necessarily what the Hamilton of old would have been. And I'm sure he's thinking about, well, if next year the car doesn't work out, what am I going to do? So Hamilton gave a very broad interview with BBC Sport. There's lots of detail on this you guys can check out over on their website that Andrew Benson did. But there's a few interesting things he said, discussing that when difficult seasons occur, he's wondering, is it me? Is it the car? Do I still have it? And then, he stuck it on pole in Hungary. Then, of course, that kind of shows that everything still can come together. One of his big frustrations, though, was the way that they dealt with last season's car, I guess this most recent season's car, saying that they thought, meaning the engineers, the fundamentals are good and we just have to go here. That wasn't the case. That's why I was frustrated in February. We know that he said, they didn't listen to me and all this stuff. And then he says, yeah, they hadn't made the changes that I'd asked for. So I was able to stay a lot more positive during the year and be like, look, it's a long season. Let's not give up. Keep pushing to get the maximum out of the car. And I'm sure that's what he feels as, the champion, the talisman of the team, needs to keep a positive mindset, try and push the team forwards, help them keep developing. But it must be frustrating when you've won everything you want to go for the 8th. And I'm sure there's part of Hamilton that realizes getting the 8th title is going to be rather unlikely because Verstappen's probably going to win for the next couple of seasons, but as Toto Wolff says in a second, Mercedes are going to try everything to stop that from happening. And then in 2026, Hamilton's going to be in his 40s. Even if the car's great, is he going to have enough to take down a Verstappen in probably what's still going to be a pretty good Red Bull with Adrian Newey at the helm? Still, it's going to be a ground effect era, so probably quite engine dependent come that season. And also at that point, Russell, if he is still the teammate of Hamilton, should be closer to Hamilton than he is now. I still think Hamilton had a phenomenal season, really, to get P3 in the car that he had, to pretty much demolish Russell over the course of this season, a driver that many people thought would come into Mercedes and kind of end Hamilton's career. Let's be honest, that's clearly not happened. So I do think his performance should very much be commended, but at the same time, I think it's clear that Hamilton is, he's not just going to wait around forever for a championship winning car, and if it's not working, he wants to put the pressure on the team to make sure that it does work, or he might just say, he's going to call it a day. It's obviously something he's considered a lot. He also tried to make it clear that he wasn't why Mike Elliott departed. It's interesting that he said this. It's important that people know that I wasn't part of his departure. So I wonder if that means that somebody was part of his departure, but it wasn't Hamilton. You know what I mean? It's like, is Hamilton saying that, Toto wanted him gone because he underperformed, or, he failed with the zero pods, but Hamilton was like, no, that wasn't me, or whether he is towing the line that the team said that, Mike Elliott decided to step away because, he didn't want to do that role anymore for whatever reason. But now Mike Elliott is immediately being linked to other teams. So you've got to wonder whether there's a little bit more to that than initially met the eye. And then Hamilton goes on to say, look, I can't win anymore. Not that he can't win a race, but, I can't win in the eyes of the fans. If you win a race, it's like, it doesn't matter. You're 7-time champion, 103 wins already. But if you lose, you get all the criticism. And as he says, there's a period of time where I was questioning whether I wanted to go through all of that. So lots of things he dived into. Of course, many people are reading into these statements as to what Hamilton's actually thinking about the current set of circumstances. He says that his performance this year, he thinks in races, are really good. His quali is an area that needs to be worked on. To be honest, quali a lot of the time comes down to confidence in the car, and if he didn't have that, he's not necessarily going to be there. Does he still quite have that last little edge that he had, let's say 2018 or even end of 2021? Maybe not, but still, I think if the car's there, Hamilton's got the best chance of pretty much any driver on the grid to really give it a good chance for Verstappen. And that's where we talk about the next car, the W15, and the confidence Mercedes have they're going to get it right. Hamilton says, we understand the car so much better now. They have developed great tools in the background so the team understands things better. So naturally, I'm hopeful, but I'm not going to hold my breath, right? And this is the kind of natural pessimism that comes in with all of these guys, and Toto Wolff is no exception. As Hamilton says, I do believe we have a North Star now. We have something to aim for, which I don't think we've had for 2 years, but still, getting there is not a straight line, and where there are certain things, decisions have to be made that just left you blocked to the end of a road. You can't do anything because of the cost cap and all of these different things, because you don't have infinite money as they used to. So Toto Wolff also gave some comments on this and said that next year's car is going to be entirely different. And we saw these comments before this season from Aston Martin that 90% of their car was going to be different. 95%, wasn't it, of their car was going to be different. And Toto Wolff says, yes, every component basically is going to be changed. So said this after the Grand Prix. it makes me sound miserable that I'm not optimistic, but it's about managing expectations to some extent. That's why I was here today with a bittersweet feeling that we've won today. We got P2, but we lost P1. And I think this is the point that, they've got to ensure they maintain this mindset at Mercedes. You can't afford to get comfortable coming seconds to Max Verstappen and Red Bull because that's not what they're there to do. So we're changing the concept. We're moving away completely from how we laid out the chassis, the weight distribution, the airflow. I mean, literally almost every component has been changed, is going to be changed, because only by doing that do we have a chance. We could get it wrong as well. So between not getting what we expect to catch up and making a big step in competing at the front, everything is possible. There's always skepticism, but that's what pushes you forward. And I think this is the right approach for Mercedes. Because last year they came into the year copying the zero pod design again. Evidently, that was a mistake, but they said that they want the car to be much better, but they want to maintain the good tyre degradation that the W13 had. They want to maintain the better race pace than qualifying that the W13 had. And there was a few things that they were trying to keep over from last year's car. This year, it doesn't feel like that's the case at all. They want to basically start from scratch. They think they understand things better now. Hamilton says they have the tools and the understanding more so than they previously did. And Russell said after the Grand Prix that from what he's understanding, they're making big steps in the background. And he said that earlier this season. We didn't really see that arrive on this year's W14, to be fair. But time will only tell, I guess, whether they get it right. But I think this is the correct approach of Mercedes, because if they try and keep anything from last year's design, or if they're just trying to copy the Red Bull, naturally they are going to fall short of expectations. If they actually want to try and beat Verstappen, either 2024 or 2025, and as I've said multiple times, there's no team other than Mercedes or Red Bull that's won a championship since going back to 2008. So if there's one team that's most likely, it's frankly always going to be Mercedes. And, their drivers are in probably the best position of anyone to actually give that a go, all things considered. So if James Allison does successfully cook up a masterpiece, maybe, just maybe, they can have a car capable of competing with the RB20 next season. It's going to be a tall order. We know that Red Bull are going to make a step. Hamilton made that clear as well, that they basically haven't upgraded their car since August, and they're still winning the final race by quite some margin. It's scary for the competition, but realistically, this is Mercedes' only chance. Now, if they get it wrong, it could backfire substantially, right? If they get it wrong and whatever they decide to do for this year's car again doesn't work, in the same way that they were very confident that the W13 was going to be a masterpiece. The zero pods, nobody else is going to be doing it, going to be the best car on the grid. That's what the simulation said. That wasn't the case, of course. If that happens again, they come up with another new idea that still fails, they're screwed for the next 2 seasons, no doubt about it. And Max will be the runaway champion. But this is probably the only way to try and stop Verstappen until 2026, of course, when things are going to substantially change. But some of these lap-led stats are pretty absurd. I mean, this is it from a full perspective. Verstappen over 1,000 laps, Perez with 146, Sainz, Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton, Russell, Tsunoda, then Alonso, despite the great campaign he had, only led 3 laps. Probably that was the start of Jeddah, wasn't it? Right, when he took the lead from Perez. Piastri led 1 as well. Albon nearly led 1 in Qatar, wasn't it? But he pitted and crossed because the pit lane line is quite a long way before the start-finish line at Qatar. So he just about didn't quite lead 1 lap, unfortunately. But I mean, yeah, these numbers are kind of absurd. And also just one final thing to mention. Driver of the Day awards. Congratulations to the Driver of the Day champion, which is Lando Norris. We know that these things are basically just a popularity contest and it doesn't really matter. And there's probably a few of these that Verstappen or Hamilton or others, and certainly Alonso, could have won in addition to what they actually did win. Perez arguably won 1 or 2 more than maybe he could or should have done given the circumstances, but it is what it is. Just kind of funny that Verstappen only got 3 of these, but it's a consistent trend where the champion won't win many Driver of the Day awards because they tend to go to a driver that's either made good progress in the field or is generally particularly well liked at that moment by the fan base. Like, there was a long time where Verstappen would win, Hamilton would win all these races, but he would never get Driver of the Day. It would be someone else coming through the field to some degree. Tsunoda got 1, Leclerc got 1, Albon got 1, Ocon got 1, and even Alonso, Sainz and Piastri both got 2 respectively, so that's kind of nice to see. But as I say, it's kind of just a popularity contest. But very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.